What's up, everybody? Tobin here with you. Thanks for checking us on out. If you guys like the Tobin and Leroy radio show, check us on out, youtube.com/The Ticket Miami, as many of you are. Much appreciated. Been doing a lot of football content, obviously, and we'll get back into that as the week rolls on. We're less than 2 weeks away from the season opening up. Dolphins and Patriots. We got a Canes game week and all that. But I want to get to this. So I was... I was slapped in the face with this on Twitter. A lot of people in my mentions with this. And my DMs and all that type of stuff. I get a lot of people like, I got a lot of watchdogs out there, people snooping around. They let me know who are the people out here who are saying things that need to be challenged. So on the Bill Simmons podcast, a.k.a. Lil Willie, he had Justin Termite, who is a radio host for SiriusXM's NBA radio. And this jackal is a little bit, he's anti-Heat. He's very, Pat Riley doesn't have a tough job. Oh, Pat Riley, he has to recruit people to Miami. And Pat Riley, he's got a charmed life. Oh, it's not really hard to do what Pat Riley has to do. That's kind of his thing, Likes to be the carnival barker who thinks that Pat Riley got a good deal in life. Pat Riley, it's just all luck. Forget the fact that I'm sure this Joker, I don't know who he roots for or what his, maybe he has none. But I imagine with a lot of these yahoos who are in New York, I'm sure he's a Knicks fan and grew up a Knicks fan. And if it was so easy, Phil Jackson, could just wave his magic stick and be a genius GM. Didn't have it with the New York Knicks is, surprising. You would think Pat Riley could get the New York Knicks to the finals. Phil Jackson, he's out here and he's trying to run the team from Montana, but it's easy to do for anybody. I am making assumptions on Justin Termite. I don't know. I don't really care. The point is, this isn't really about what he said about Pat Riley in the past. It's what him and Lil Willie had to say about the Heat in the future. Now, if I could reenact a little bit about what these two idiots had to say, it was something to the effect of this, where they were ripping the Miami Heat's offseason. And he was something like, oh, this is Termite. He goes, but Bill, I mean, they didn't have a good offseason. And all this idea that Pat Riley, could get anybody that he wants. He's got a charmed life. No state tax. No state tax. Did I mention no state tax? And they never get stars. And then Lil Willie comes out with, Justin, if you don't get stars, they pulled the Jimmy Butler thing out of nowhere. So I guess that's why, there's one reason that Dragic out of nowhere, and Kyle Lowry the year before, and we give me the Orem. But it's who needs that? I mean, isolated incidents. Yeah. No, it was 3 isolated incidents. It's crazy, 3 isolated incidents, and because that's what that is when it's isolated. It's 3 times. Not to mention the big 3 also. If we're just and Shaq, but if we're just gonna go over Pat Riley's history of never getting stars. You're right. It's the same. It's samesies because he's comparing it to Danny Ainge. Oh, Danny Ainge is always in these almost deals, and what about Pat Riley? So let me get this straight. So the stars that Pat Riley has recently brought in with Goran Dragic, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry have gotten them to Eastern Conference Finals, but he never gets anybody. Never gets anybody because they didn't get anybody just now with trading for Kevin Durant, a generational player, with the Nets lashing out wanting 3 all-stars to get Kevin Durant in return. Crazy. What Pat Riley washed. What a bum. Look, I'm not here to say that the Heat have had the most dazzling offseason in the world. Clearly they have not. They went into this offseason and they're like, what we're doing? We're taking home run swings, which is, in my opinion, what you do when you are a shot away from going to the NBA Finals. Everybody can sit here and they can kiss Boston's ass. They can be like, Boston, you did so many good things. You got Danilo Gallinari and Malcolm Brogdon. And when they're not playing in the playoffs because they're hurt like they always are, if those two got hurt and they didn't make the NBA Finals, everybody's like, oh, Danilo Gallinari and Malcolm Brogdon were hurt, and that's why Boston didn't make the Finals. But if the Miami Heat did something similar, if Danilo Gallinari was on the Miami Heat for whatever reason, even though he's been flirting with the Miami Heat for 5 years, never wanted him. But he's always in Heat rooms. If he was on the Heat, you bet your ass nobody would say a peep about Danilo Gallinari being hurt on the Heat. Just like these two jackasses said when it comes down to this. Because the thing that actually annoyed me more than criticizing the offseason, because I don't think that the offseason is above criticism. If you want to say, should you really run it back? I think Pat Riley, if he had his ways, yeah, of course. He'd like to have some kind of spice to this offseason that would have gotten him just obviously over the hump for Jimmy Butler. To get that monster score next to Jimmy and Bam, that would be that absolute final piece that you would say they are bar none the favorites right now. I'm not sitting here and saying the Heat are the bar none favorites, but I think the disrespect that they get as a franchise, and particularly the disrespect Jimmy Butler gets as a star in this league, is absolutely ridiculous, because that's what it is. When you disrespect the Miami Heat and you're looking at this entire thing and you're trying to take the long-range view on it, and you're saying to yourself, why don't I think the Miami Heat can do what they did against? Because I don't think Jimmy Butler can do what he did again, even though he has done that two out of the three playoffs he has been with the Miami Heat. And the playoffs that he didn't was the most fugazi playoffs there ever was, because it was basically on a run it back-to-back season, and their team was run to the ground because they had just coming off the NBA Finals and were playing an insane stretch of basketball in that finite period. And everybody who had gotten as far as the Heat had fallen by the wayside immediately in that postseason, Boston included. But for some reason, the Heat are the only ones where people seem to remember. This is a typical Northeastern thing where it's like, Boston, we'll listen to Grant Williams say, we're the better team. We were just not as disciplined. We'll listen to that. But if the Heat have anything to say, shut up, pipe down. The other thing that's funny about it that these two charlatan bums had to say was the idea that the Miami Heat, this Termite, he's like out here and he's like, well, the Miami Heat, they're like the worst one seed I've ever seen in my life. And I believe the word he used were, they were one of the historically worst one seeds, and their road to the NBA, to the Eastern Conference Finals, was putrid, which is it's kind of a funny thing of talking out of both sides of your mouth, because first of all, historically bad one seed. What does exactly that mean? They were able to be the one seed over a season where they had stretches without Jimmy Butler, without Bam Adebayo, without Kyle Lowry. Apparently, overcoming adversity has now become a thing we laugh at sports, usually something that we applaud. But now, when it comes to the Miami Heat, of course, we have to look and say, frauds, don't buy it. And typically, when we have something like that happen, okay, you want to talk about fraud one seeds, we'll talk about like Dallas Mavericks back in the day, Dirk Nowitzki winning the MVP, getting bounced by the Golden State Warriors back in the day. Now you can talk about, man, that's one of the historically worst one seeds I've ever seen in my life. You want to talk about like the Toronto Raptors, the years where they would just get absolutely clubbed by LeBron James every single year. You want to say fraud one seed. But to look at the Miami Heat and see their season, which is 2 seasons removed from them being in the NBA Finals, their core players of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo being still part of that team here. And you want to just dismiss it as, they're historically one of the worst. Seems a little dumb, doesn't it? And as far as the road being putrid, first of all, when you're a one seed, Termite, if you could take off your green tights and grow up, Peter Pan, typically, as the one seed, you get an easy first round matchup. That's just typically how it works. I would imagine if we were to look back at the history of the NBA of one seed matchups, that we would say, wow, kind of an easy first round pass. Nobody ever puts the score of what the first round matchup was of a team's path to the title. And the only reason you want to pretend like the Celtics had any tougher run is because they got to go up against the Brooklyn Nets, who they swept and were a disgrace all year. And one of the biggest disgraces in the history of sports, if we're going to talk about frauds. But to say that the Heat had this putrid run, let me tell you something, dude. I see plenty of articles, and I bet you did plenty of segments about who was the best player in that series. I bet you that there were plenty of you jokers out there who were saying it was Trae Young. Meanwhile, Trae Young was looking for his blankie and pacifier by the end of it because he couldn't shake Gabe Vincent, another person you're probably out here disrespecting. The other thing that's funny about it is Philadelphia. There's not a team and narrative that people have been wanting to push more than the Philadelphia 76ers. They're dying for the Philadelphia 76ers to be a thing. Dying for it. You had at the end of that series, Joel Embiid say into a microphone that his running mate, James Harden, is not Houston James Harden anymore. He's not that guy anymore. So maybe you should take the credibility and the talking points of the guy your guys are dying for to be the MVP more so than you guys just not wanting to give the Miami Heat credit. Because what Joel Embiid actually said after that series, and he got his ass kicked by Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo after everybody was dying for Joel Embiid to be back there, you'll sit there and you say, oh, boo-boo on his face, it was hurting. Oh, poor Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid got hurt. Shocking. He always gets hurt. Again, this is another thing where it's like when it comes to Miami, we could just ignore the fact that their starting point guard was out there limping and not playing at the end of that series. But if it was any other team, we would be running to that excuse. And here you have James Harden, who can't get his fat ass up and down the court, and Joel Embiid, who gets put together like Humpty Dumpty every single season. And you'll run to make excuses for that team and say, oh, well, that wasn't a true team. That was a true test. Ignoring the fact that the Miami Heat were dealing with their own injuries. It's hilarious. It's hilarious to me. But okay, you want to say that's putrid. Then you come and you say that, oh, well, the Miami Heat, I thought that series should have been over in 5 games. Okay, dude, but guess what? It wasn't. And you want to know something that's hilarious about it? Again, I'll go to the credibility of the players who are actually out there playing, not you, not Bill Simmons, who are out here saying that the Heat, their star grabbing power is a bunch of isolated incidents, which doesn't even make sense. Isolated incident, that's one, dummies, okay? You guys have college degrees. I think that you guys write. So I would expect a little bit more out of you. Isolated is one. You guys bring up multiple incidents time after time after time. That's not an isolated incident. That's what we call in the business a pattern. Where I use Joel Embiid saying that his own player, James Harden, his running mate, isn't Houston James Harden anymore, which is basically saying he's washed. He also said, I never wanted to not play with Jimmy Butler. You want to know why he said that? Because he knows that Jimmy Butler's a star. So, fast forward to the Celtics series, let's go and talk to Jason Tatum, who just did a sit-down with Taylor Rooks, who's good at her job, unlike you two jackals. And Jason Tatum says to Taylor Rooks, my heart stopped when Jimmy Butler took that 3. I couldn't even look at the basket. That is Jason Tatum. You're Prince. You're Messiah. This is what he said. My heart stopped. I didn't want to look at the basket because I was so scared of that shot Jimmy Butler took. You want to know why? Because Jimmy Butler was an absolute terror in that series, and he was the best player in the playoffs. The best player in the playoffs. And so, we can sit here and we can listen to Lil Willie and we can listen to Termite. But me, personally, I'm going to listen to the likes of Jason Tatum. I'm going to listen to the likes of Joel Embiid. I'm going to listen to the likes of Trae Young, who, by the way, was saying that they need to put Gabe Vincent on a poster afterwards because he was so hard to shake in that series. You call that a putrid run, but I know that if it was any other way, any other team, you guys would be throwing rose petals at the way. And by the way, putrid run. You're going to sit here and you're going to talk about the Celtics run like they didn't get past a Bucks team that didn't have Chris Middleton? Like, come on, dude. What are we doing there? Has this been a perfect offseason for the Miami Heat? No. Clearly not. They were going after Kevin Durant. They seemingly are going after Donovan Mitchell. Do I think they're going to get Donovan Mitchell? Doesn't look great based on what that joker Danny Ainge is trying to get as a draft pick haul. But to just dismiss this team and not act like Kyle Lowry wasn't limping around out there, and Tyler Hero, who is let me just check. He's going to be he's not even 23 years old yet. So to act like he's not going to do any improvement, or Bam Adebayo's not going to have any improvement, and then to act like Kyle Lowry, who's not been a guy who's been super banged up his entire career, can't make some kind of a bounce back, I think is a little irresponsible of you guys. And once again, I sit here a year later or months later having to defend a Miami Heat postseason run where no other team has to do this. This never happens to any other franchise where you have to defend runs and you have to explain to people. Maybe you guys should just understand what trends are. I don't know what that is. You don't know what isolated means. And if something happens 2 out of 3 years, perhaps, this is just me, I don't know. maybe you should just accept that Jimmy Butler and the Heat are good. I don't know. Call me crazy.